Spider-Man is in the DorkLair! Welcome to another DorkLair action figure review. Today I'm taking a look at the Mezco 112 Collective Classic Suit Spider-Man. I just got back from seeing Far From Home and I am super pumped about Spider-Man right now, and I decided I'd want to do a review on a Spider-Man figure, but I don't have any new ones, so I'm going back to an archive figure that I picked up well before I had the YouTube channel going, so I feel like we're kind of overdue to get this review in there. I have done a couple of the other ones. I did the homemade suit from Homecoming and then the sort of regular suit from Homecoming, but this is the first comic book Spider-Man that I've done, and it's the only comic book Spider-Man that I have from Mezco. I also have the Mafex comic book Spider-Man, but I don't have the Mezco black suit or the Mezco Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man version either, both of which I'd like to pick up at some point. I just haven't really had the I haven't prioritized them really just yet, but this figure is awesome. This is one of my top Mezcos. I think I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was definitely in like my top 5 at the end of last year when I did my list. Yeah, so this figure is fantastic. It's maybe a little bit limited in articulation compared to some of the other figures that they've done, like the homemade suit. That one's in articulation is really quite awesome. But I love the colors on this. I love all of the design choices. The accessories are fantastic. Lots of different sort of web features, alternate head that gives it a more classic, like 60s comic look. And this is just an awesome figure. And let's get into this review. Okay, for the packaging, your standard Mezco box, I really like what they've done. That shiny sort of glossed polished finish there. They've done that on the webs, on all the black webs, so you get like this kind of cool effect as the light reflects off it. Really great looking box. Spider-Man at the top, the 112 logo and the Marvel logo at the bottom. On the side you get this blue side with the old school Spider logo that's also shiny. As you can see on the back you have product pictures with accessories, so you can see everything it comes with in a couple glam shots in the same logo on the side. Great packaging. I love Mezco's boxes. They're very collector friendly. It's easy to get everything in and out. Awesome box. Okay, getting a look at the skull paint and details on this figure. So there's a couple things going on. First of all, you have sculpted hard plastic parts like the head and the neck, and then the forearms, gloves, and then the boot, basically like boots down here. So those parts are sculpted, and then you have a fabric suit over the whole rest of the body. And I think they've done a pretty good job of sort of blending that in. It's not perfect. You can see this is a little more, has that kind of like more flat color to it, and this is a little shinier. But I still think that they did a pretty good job of that transition. It doesn't look crazy. It probably looks worse on camera in terms of like the contrast between the shiny plastic parts and then the slightly less shiny fabric parts. And so what you have is a suit that's mostly like a spandex kind of material here, and then over the top of that spandex there's a an overlay of sort of like pleather-like material. So something that's really neat about the head is that there's like a translucency going on with the eyes that gives it a depth. It's almost like the eyes have a lens over the top, and then behind it is this white sort of like pearl color going on. So that gives it a really neat kind of depth to the head sculpt. And as you come around the head, you can see everything is painted very cleanly. All of those black web lines are all sculpted and then painted on top. Those are not recessed with the web lines. Those are raised web lines. You can kind of see, I feel like my head is very, very even. I don't think I have too much like sloppiness. There's maybe a slight bit, or the lines right up top there don't quite match up, but that might be a trick of the light. And going into the neck, same kind of sculpting into the neck as well right there. And I'll stick with the plastic parts right now, so just kind of give you a look at the hands and the gauntlets. You can see they kind of have like a curved thing, and then the fabric is tucked in over there. So the other gauntlet here, and the hands are also nicely sculpted. And then the boots, same kind of thing going on. The feet, I think, are maybe a little big. They feel kind of large on him. Like if you kind of get a sense of how big the figure is, like the feet feel maybe slightly large, but I don't mind it. It's kind of superhero proportions, big hands, big feet. So then the feet are sculpted in almost like this athletic sort of sneaker-like kind of look to them, but they match pretty well with the rest of that sort of boot type thing. Taking a look at the suit itself, I think mine's pretty printed on pretty straight. I don't see any issues with it. Spider logo on the back. You can see more of that overlay. Something that you're probably going to want to watch out for, especially with figures with this pleather, is the way you pose him. Some really dynamic poses will cause some crinkling in that leather, but for the most part, it's, like the place where it's crinkling might happen is actually just the spandex fabric, like the elbows and then the armpits and then the knees. So it's not too big of a deal. When you flex the chest, though, you will get some underneath. So I usually sort of pull it and then pose it that way as I bend the torso. I do like the shape of the spider on the front as well, and I think mine's pretty centered. Looks really good. So yeah, I really love the idea of a fully sort of fabric suited Spider-Man. You can't see any of the joints. I think one of the problems, though, is that it kind of limits the articulation a little bit and maybe limits what kind of dynamic pose you're going to want to keep it in long term because of that pleather. But this is my favorite Spider-Man in my collection, I'm pretty sure. I do like it more than I like that Mafex one, even though this one isn't as articulated and maybe not quite as like comic accurate or whatever, but this one, in my opinion, is my favorite Spider-Man in my collection. All right, so that you can see how this guy sizes up to a few other figures. He's actually pretty big for a 112 Spider-Man, because Spider-Man should be a little bit shorter, like he's kind of a kid or whatever. But there he is next to the Mafex Spider-Man, and then here he is next to the Homecoming Mezco Spider-Man. And you can see he's pretty tall, but he does kind of scale in with some of the other Mezcos, especially like the comic book stuff. So here he is next to the homemade suit from Homecoming, and then bringing in a couple other characters from Mezco, the modern style Captain America. So yeah, he probably shouldn't be quite as tall as Captain America. And then you have a comparison to Iron Man, which I do think he scales pretty well with Iron Man. Iron Man kind of bigger than him. And then finally, let's see how he looks next to, this is the SH Figuarts Hulk, but I've got some like custom pants and head on him, so he's more of a classic look. But these three I think look awesome together, just like this. And while I have the Tom Holland figure out, let's take a look and see if this head will pop on here. So let's pop this one off, pop this one off. You got to get the neck off of here and then get it on this head and see how it looks. So it does fit, like it does, the peg does fit, but you can see it's quite high up on the neck. And maybe a little bit small. So that look is not really going to do it. But I do have a casting cave Tom Holland head that I picked up a while back. And the peg hole is higher up. And I actually think that one looks pretty decent on here. It's not the most amazing Tom Holland sculpt. I think it looks like him. But in terms of just getting a Peter Parker head, the casting cave head I think fits on here really well. And for the accessories, he comes with this second head sculpt with a much more squinty-eyed, old-school, old 60s comics, Ditko-esque kind of look to it. It's basically the same head sculpt, just with a different expression in the eyes there, with the same kind of pearlescent, recessed, lens-covered eyes there. So really nice. This is a great option to have if you want to go super classic comic book style. He also comes with these sort of open hands. One is like totally splayed out, and then the other one is like sort of wall crawling type of a hand. And then he's got these web line holding hands, just like a regular sort of gripping hand, and they're pretty malleable and flexible, and it's very easy to get the line in and out of his hands. And finally, he has the web shooting hands, one for each side, also sculpted very nicely. And one of the cool things about this hand is that the web line actually goes right into the recess there and is hidden. So once you pop that hand on him, you can see it's, you can't actually see it around his wrist like you can with a lot of other figures. So Really, really cool trick right there that they did with the design of that web shooter right there. And the other ones are the same. So let's take a look at those. So a little closer look at this particular web. It has a little like spread end there. And then the whole thing is, I don't know if it's just sculpted in this or if it has some kind of coating on it, but it's got this great kind of shine to it that really makes it feel like spider webs, like silk or something like that, which is really cool. And then it's got a different kind of sort of like spread web. This is just firing out a long shot of web there, almost like it's going to cover someone. And then he's got a couple globs. So this one here is a little bit shorter, and then he's got this one here that's slightly longer than that. So these two just sort of like web bullet glob type things. And then finally, same kind of finish, but this one's made out of wire, not a stiff plastic. This is the bendable, flexible one that you can kind of have him swinging from. So that's a really great feature to have this really cool bendable one as well, in addition to the ones that kind of peg into the wrist. So really cool stuff. Lots of fun web accessories, and you can do a lot of fun things with it. He's also got a clamp here that's got a magnet on one end, so you can put that on like a metal piece. I have one of my Spider-Men on the rack thing inside my DTOF case, and it's sort of like up in the corner, and that can definitely stick to it. It's not like the most perfect kind of place to put it, but it does work, and any other metal piece that you can kind of find to stick it onto is really cool. And finally, as with every Mezco figure, he does come with the 5-inch stand. I actually lost the peg, so I have the peg from a black stand in there just to fill in because I had him standing up earlier. And it also comes with the arm like all the other ones do. And finally, for the articulation on Spider-Man, the head can come down this far. There's the neck and the head both move, and it can rotate all the way back up this far. So looking up does really good job right there. And then the neck can kind of go to the side a little bit and to the other side. One of the issues I had that I felt really weakened the Homecoming regular suit Spider-Man was the fact that the base of the neck, even though it's articulated, it didn't really move much. But luckily this one does, so there's quite a good range of movement. You do want to be careful. Some people have said that their neck is starting to fray. I might have a little bit right there, but mine's doing all right. I just think you don't want to be super aggressive or rough with it when you're articulating the neck at the base where the fabric tucks in there. The arms can rotate up quite a bit, and then they can rotate all the way around as far as the fabric will take it, at least. Bicep has a swivel up at the top there, and then there's a double jointed elbow right here. It can move up about that far. It does look a little weird, sort of like round right there, but that's what you get when you have a double jointed elbow. It's not going to quite look realistic there. My gauntlet on this side is a little bit loose, and it can kind of like pop off a little bit. There's definitely like the fabric is glued in there somewhere. I haven't totally taken it apart because I don't really want to, but that can come a little bit loose over there. I don't know how glued it's supposed to be. This one doesn't seem to pull off quite as much, but you can see as you rotate it, like it does kind of separate a little bit there. But there is some rotation there. And then as you get into the wrist, it will hinge back and forth quite a bit and swivel all the way around on that ball joint. Okay, so before I do the torso articulation, just one thing to mention that I forgot to mention in the sculpt, paint, and details. The fabric over here does have a little sloppiness in the stitching there. It's not too bad on this side, but this side's a little bit sloppier. I tend to not notice it that much, but yeah, you can kind of see it on the side there when you do lift his arms up. So for the torso articulation, it's pretty good. So he can, the upper torso can come this far forward and this far back, and it can kind of rock side to side really well, and it can also rotate. And then the bottom of the torso, so at the waist, he can turn not all the way around, but he can turn a little bit there. So you can see that rotating a bit, and it adds a little bit of crunch as well there, and a little crunch back there. So he gets quite a bit of movement when you combine those two joints. Not spectacular, but pretty good for a Mezco. Moving into the legs, there's a upper thigh swivel, and then you can see the ball joint sort of behind the fabric there, and he can kick up pretty far, and as you rotate the leg out, he can go up even further. So he can kick his leg up that far, and you can kick it back this much, and he can go out into the splits pretty much all the way. He has double jointed knees, so you can swing that knee up and then get the other joint going. So his knee will come up this far, and then there's a little bit of movement in the boot right there. Just, a couple poses that might matter a little bit, but I don't get too crazy. Just like with the wrist thing, I try not to move that around too much because there's that fabric tucked in, so I just try to be careful with that. And then the feet, this is one of the weaker parts of the articulation. The feet can rock in this far and then rock out that far. And they can't really point down very far either, which is usually something you want your Spider-Man to be able to do. And it can point up this far. So he can't when he's crouching forward, I wish it would go up further this way. It just doesn't. So it kind of goes up just about that far. So overall, this is one of my favorite Mezcos of all time. It's just got so much fun. It's one of the ones I pull out and play with. It's got a couple issues, like this wrist is a little bit loose, and the articulation could be better, especially in the feet. But overall, I think it's an excellent figure. I just love the overall look of it. I love how fun it is to play with and pose around. I do know that it's starting to become a little bit harder to find at this point. I think a lot of the online stores that used to always sort of still have it in stock, they're sort of not in stock anymore. And I think it's maybe jumping up in price a slight bit. So right now is probably a good time. If you don't have this figure yet and you want it, I would say grab it during this downtime. It's summertime, it's convention season, people are letting go of figures. You could probably still find someone selling one of these for retail price, but pretty soon we're going to get to a point where this figure is probably not going to be as easy to find because it's just starting to sell out at a lot of spots. So if you want this figure, I'd be on the hunt now and try to pick one up. And so thanks for watching my video. Don't forget to check out my other videos. I just recently reviewed the brand new Joker figure from Mezco. Been doing a ton of Mythic Legions stuff. And don't forget about the DorkLair Collecting Podcast. We're going to be hitting 100 episodes very soon. And until next time, may the Force be with you. DorkLair.